Thanks again, CK. So my name is Prayukth. I'm representing an organization called Subex. So we are a 25-year-old organization. We have been working with telcos all this while, and now we have branched out into a cybersecurity space as well. Because all this while we were working very closely with telcos, solving their key challenges in areas such as understanding the customer requirements and protecting them from all kinds of fraud. So we use that background of ours to venture into cybersecurity, and we started with IoT and OT, and now we have branched out and we are covering everything that is cybersecurity as of today. And to tell us a bit about ourselves without bragging much, today we are a global company present across all the livable continents. We've got active deployments going everywhere else. We have been ranked as the best or you know uh, the best IoT security platform of the year 2019 by Compass Intelligence, which is one of the biggest analyst groups in North America, actually. And 2020 is here, so we are waiting for some more laurels to come our way. So while we wait for them, just to let you guys know, today we run the largest honeypot network in the world. By that I mean that we have the largest threat intelligence gathering facility available in terms of IoT, as far as IoT is concerned, operational as of today in 62 cities. And the kind of data we are collecting from these honeypot networks is what I'm presenting in front of you today. And I hope this will be insightful for you as much as it is for us, because we are seeing some very interesting action that's been happening for the last 4 or 5 months since this COVID-19 set in, actually. Just some of the ecosystems we secure. Industrial IoT is right up there. And I'll tell you the reason why we are so excited by the challenges that industrial IoT is posed so far. Moving forward, so what has changed in the last 5 months? This is the question that we keep on getting asked very often, because we were one of the first cybersecurity vendors to come out and say that this particular pandemic is not just something that is affecting us as people or our health, but this is also affecting us in cyberspace as well. So very early on, as early as Feb of this year, we were able to see certain COVID-19 team that attacks that had started taking place in isolated pockets around the world. And by these attacks, what I mean is that there were a lot of phishing mails that have been sent to employees of organizations telling them that there are COVID-19 kits, PPE kits being distributed for free and things like that. They were masquerading as government communication and diplomatic communication and whatnot, and they were luring these employees of some organizations, including leading manufacturers, to actually click on them and download malware. So that is how this story, actually, this narrative started, and things really went downhill from there onwards. So as everyone speaks about the new normal in terms of social distancing, in terms of work from home and everything else, we have a slightly different take on everything that is happening as of now. So we are starting with something called as a deflective attacks that are taking place on manufacturing, which basically is that manufacturing as a sector is getting attacked not as a primary target, but what really is happening is hackers are targeting manufacturing so that the CERT and other teams which are involved in cyber defense at a national level for a country are occupied with these attacks. So what they do is all the resources that are involved in cyber defense are kept tied up while they start scouting for attacking other pieces of critical infrastructure. There is targeted communication manipulation at scales that we've never seen before. As I said, people are masquerading as government agencies, the World Health Organization. They are issuing advisories with links which are embedded links which are which on clicking them or accessing them will lead to download of ransomware, malware, and whatnot. Then this is the most worrying part, that the coordinated attacks, cyber attacks, have risen 41%. So what do I mean by coordinated attacks? Basically, earlier we used to see certain groups which were very much focused on attacking industrial infrastructure. But today we are seeing a lot of these groups working together to effect a breach. And there was a lot of new actors who have joined in the last 5 months. A lot of hackers who were not really very active in the last 2 to 3 years have gotten active now as part of larger groups that they have become affiliated with. And this is definitely a worrying development that really is a matter of concern for us. And look at the next point there, which is that more attacks were logged in the 3 quarters of, more attacks were logged in the first quarter of 2020 than the 3 quarters of 2019 put together. That's a telling statement again there, to indicate that what's the scale of attacks that we are seeing. This is completely unprecedented. A lot of people have been taken off guard, but we were one of the few players who had anticipated this spike, and I'll tell you why on that. And Southeast Asia has become a very active zone. All players, I mean, I guess almost about 30% of all the APT, which is the state-sponsored hacker groups that we are monitoring, are active in this particular zone. Actually, there is a lot of data that's been exfiltrated, a lot of breaches that are happening, a lot of companies are getting affected, and they are not even aware that a breach has taken place. So this is a very tough time for all of us, not just in terms of our health and everything else and physical well-being, but also in cyberspace. These concerns, which are connected with what they call the new normal, have not even been understood to the fullest extent, right? So as we go along, we'll see more matters of concern come to the fore. So this is what we did in Feb. As early as the first week of Feb, we were seeing certain patterns of communication taking place through our intelligence that we used to gather from all sources, including the dark web. So there was a lot of planning activity going on amongst hackers. They were regrouping and grouping again. As I said, new hackers were being recruited. So obviously there was a lot of planning and action going on in the background, while governments and everyone else were really busy, fighting this pandemic and understanding how these things are going to, pan out in the future. And this is way before the lockdown started. This is way before some countries even had their first cases being reported. So look at how early these hackers have really jumped into this particular space. So there's a lot of planning that's gone in, a lot of foresight, and we are of the opinion that the kind of sophistication that these hackers have shown indicates that these are professional level hackers and beyond as well. And there's a lot of state-sponsored hackers who have also joined the fray now in a big way, and they are attacking industrial deployments for various reasons as we go ahead. So as that line mentions there, that there's a high level of adaptability that these hackers have shown in terms of not just understanding the behavior of people who they are targeting, but also the behavior of the management and the responses that are going to come in from these companies and entities that are getting targeted. So the days of psychological operations and psychological manipulation is long gone. The days of social engineering are gone. Now we have gone on to this new normal, as we would also like to call it for now, for want of a better jargon. This new normal is going to come and haunt us in the near future, because the hackers have really increased the gap between us and them, and they are right now winning the arms race like never before. So these are matters of concern. And look at the first point there in terms of the major trends that we've seen. That in the past, we used to see a major manufacturer experiencing some form of breach once every 8 weeks. Today, that has come down to 2 weeks. And these are just the reported ones that we have been monitoring in the last, almost 90 days, we can say. And you heard of how a major auto maker was breached in the recent past. And nowadays, there is so much panic in certain sectors that people have shut down operations. Entire assembly plants have been shut down for people to really relook at their security strategies, because some of them have really understood how close this particular problem really is to them. Manufacturing associations are being targeted for information. There was a major association in the US which was targeted so that they could get the database of people who are involved in managing the security for some of these top manufacturers out there. And again, look at the number of malware variants that have been detected, 68%. So what really is happening here is that they are not investing in building new malwares. There is some investment that's going on, but the focus is on building newer variants of existing malware, right? So what happens is your cycle is reduced. You can have more variants created per week than if you are to invest in building a new malware altogether. So they want to really have, or rather exploit the situation to the maximum, the situation as in the confusion that COVID-19 has really created, and affect these breaches faster. And this is something interesting, that the attacks are up, the breaches are up, but the leaked data, the stolen data that they have taken from these companies and entities that have been targeted, have not shown up to the extent it should really show up on the dark web. So what does this mean? So we'd like to say that what this means clearly is that they are holding on to that particular data. They have not really released it because they are very confident that they can extort a lot of ransom from the entities who have been breached in the near future. And definitely this data is going to show up sometime in the future. This could also mean that the entities who have been breached, or where successful breaches have happened, are not even aware that they have been breached. Again, a big matter of concern for all of us. So in terms of manufacturing specifically, what are the real challenges that we are seeing, which is led to this situation? So there's a lot of geopolitical instability. There are a lot of law and order issues that have popped up in some countries because of COVID-19, playing a factor in the background. Then you have easy availability of OT equipment on e-commerce sites, so which means that they can really do their digital surgeries on these equipment to figure out what kind of vulnerabilities are there associated with them. Hackers can order DDoS attacks, like everything is available on demand now on the dark web and certain forums where these hackers congregate. You can order specific tailored customized attacks. In fact, they even come and suggest, if you have a certain ransom that you want to sort of extract, then they'll tell you which segment should you be going after, and they will set it all up for you for a certain percentage of revenue share or some other model that they are working together on. Then they are also creating a lot of variants faster. They are designed to evade these existing systems which are based on signatures alone. They're trying to evade them by creating newer malware, newer variants, which are not really easy to detect again. And convergence of IoT and OT, as Francisco rightly mentioned, so many opportunities, but on the other side, it has created a lot of cyber surface area for these cyber attacks. And last point, of course, cyber hygiene. Uh, that's something that can never be overemphasized, because sometimes in situations like COVID-19 and beyond, people really don't focus on following these basic cyber hygiene rules because they are confused, they're anxious, or they might be under some kind of pressure, or they're working from home, and they are not in monitored environments and things like that. And your ability to be part of a compromise increases again. So if you look at the way this entire chain works as far as infections are concerned, they're using your own equipment, infrastructure, your data, and your people against you. That's the way they are seeing all this as. So in case of the deflective attacks, as I mentioned earlier, wherein manufacturing is a decoy target, they're really using the manufacturing sector itself as a catalyst for performing a larger attack on the economy of a country, especially when you're talking about state-backed hackers. And a lot of intellectual property has really exchanged hands in the last 60 days. A lot of it must be considering must have lots to do with manufacturing, and a lot of it has to do with healthcare as well. Specifically, we have seen and heard our intelligence team tell us that there's a lot of COVID-19 vaccine related data that has been compromised again. So that certain countries or certain actors or certain agencies can get a head start on really getting this information and get their own COVID-19 vaccine development efforts into high gear. And just today morning, we saw a very interesting data there in terms of certain labs which have just popped up in the last 3 to 4 weeks with absolutely no background in biotech or vaccine development, actually talking about clinical trials reaching the large scale. So that's really interesting. Again, we could be wrong there, but we also have reasons to believe that at least few of these players might have something to do with these IP compromises that have really happened through the malware that these sophisticated hackers have really deployed. And also to talk about the surface attack, the surface area that has grown incredibly in the last few years, ever since this converged environment has come into the picture. So the attackers now have so many options to really take things, take data and everything else out of your infrastructure like never before. So now they can plan, they can execute, they may even be aware of surface areas that you may not be aware of. They may be aware of devices that you are not discovered yet. They may be aware of open ports that you may not have really closed after you did your initial round of proof of concept or some other go live that you've done for an IoT deployment, for instance. So everything is really adding up, and this COVID situation has really added another force multiplier for these hackers to really exploit. So they have gone everywhere. They have used it to the best extent possible. So as I said, in the coming days, we will really know what's the full impact of this breach. Again, the advanced persistent threat actors who are more or less state backed, who are extremely sophisticated. Again, these are the kind of targets they've really gone after: intellectual property, diplomatic communication. They wanted to know what the governments were doing, how were they dealing with COVID-19 and its fallout, what kind of numbers were these governments circulating internally, and things like that. Economic data, in-state advisories, drone feeds. Again, I mean, you would be wondering why are they after? Again, they wanted to probably check, what kind of what's the economic activity happening in key cities, for instance, of a certain country. COVID-19 numbers, antivirus logs. So from all the 43 APT groups that we were targeting, as many as 39 were active in the last 90 days. Again, that's very interesting. Like those are very high numbers to see, which obviously means a lot of these guys have got a lot of work on their hands, and maybe even subcontracting some of this work to APT groups which are just coming up the curve. And in terms of the sectoral attacks, if you notice, manufacturing is right up there. Again, it's not as much as healthcare, because healthcare, obviously, for various reasons, has been targeted extensively in the last 90 to 100 days. But manufacturing is really up there as probably the next sector that is attracting the maximum number of attacks. So if you notice, these are all part of the overall trends that, like APT groups, for instance, have different motives. There are other hackers with different motives, but they're all converging on sectors like healthcare and manufacturing. Healthcare, again, for various reasons. Manufacturing primarily for IP, and to ensure that the disruption continues into the foreseeable future. Also, that might be another incentive that these hackers have for continuing, continuously targeting these entities. And look at that number there in the bottom. That is 13.3% of all stolen data on dark web is from manufacturing entities. Again, these are conservative numbers. It might be more. It could be really higher than this. And in the future, this might see a huge jump as all the breach data, this more stolen data which the hackers are holding on to, is released onto the dark web. And it's not going to happen in the next year or so, but it will happen in the next couple of quarters. That's the way we are seeing it. Because sooner or later, even after these entities pay up these ransoms that have been asked for, there is no guarantee that they will not go ahead and release this information or sell this information to some other hacker groups. There's that kind of trade also happening out there. And at the end of the day, it is all about making money for some of these hackers. So they wouldn't mind selling it over and over again, and some of them might end up releasing this data on the dark web. Just some of the sample emails that we intercepted, where which you're talking about, we'll give you a particular kit or something, and then you can really use these kits to protect yourself. You have to download this particular attachment, sign it up digitally, and send it back to WHO. Again, obviously these are fake mails. These are, again, mails intended to create a sense of urgency in the employees, and then take them down, take the organizations they're connected with down through encrypting their data and asking for a ransom to begin with. So again, the question that needs to be asked by all of us, or rather answered by all of us, is: can we afford a breach at this point in time, or any other point in time for that matter? Right now, the costs are really increasing, and the hackers are really going after the money like anything. So if you notice the way it is, the ransom amounts and average ransom amounts have grown. It is almost at 7 million USD in as of today, as things stand. It's going to go up as we go ahead. Even if you're talking about cyber insurance or any other underlying cover that manufacturers can take to evade these situations, I don't think we are in a situation now where and even an insurance cover can guarantee that the amount of ransom they are asking for can be met with again. But another interesting aspect, which I mentioned below there, that cybersecurity investments are rising, but the actual capex and opex is not, which basically means that some of the investments, or some of the so-called investments, are going into, like fixing a setup, after fixing the infrastructure after an actual hack is taking place, an actual breach is taking place, which is again worrying. because that's not really a cybersecurity investment if you're spending your money allocated for cybersecurity into putting your systems back in place. So these are the kind of dichotomies again we are seeing. They are not forced, but then again, if we follow certain measures that I'm going to outline in the next few slides, we can avoid these kind of situations and not be part of this particular statistic that we're seeing right in front of us. So what really lies ahead? Where are we going from here onwards? That's a question that again we have tried to answer here. So the first wave of attacks got over as of May, and right now we are in the middle of the second wave of attacks that are taking place as we speak. So first wave, again, lot of sophistication was there. A lot of these attacks materialized in terms of ransom for these hackers. So they have taken all that money that they've got and they've invested in building better malware and going after many more industries and manufacturing plants which are coming online after these lockdowns have been lifted. So the average cost of breach, again, it's going to go up phenomenally this year, because since the hackers have put in a lot of effort, they're definitely going to make sure that they monetize these attacks. Then again, COVID-19 research has been stolen with increasing this thing. And there is a lot of, as I said, increased APT action. The state-backed hackers are also part of a lot of these breaches that are taking place for various reasons, including geopolitical tensions that we're seeing right now in a lot of regions across the world. So that is adding to the confusion, and that's creating way more problems, because these actors are not really after the money, but they want to sort of send a geopolitical message to a certain state by attacking their facilities. Breach discovery will increase significantly, because as the lockdowns are lifted and people come back to work, and they connect their machines back into monitored networks, and the attack chain gets completed, there is definitely going to be some disruption or some kind of a ransom demand that will pop up the moment the ransomware is executed and the data gets logged. So a lot of these instances are going to come to the fore in the next 90 to 120 days. And yeah, 2020 is going to be the costliest year, if it already hasn't been. We can't even predict or forecast what's the kind of numbers that we'll have to worry about as the year comes to an end, because it's going to be a tiring year for everybody involved in cybersecurity. It's not a year that we would want to see repeated ever again, because it's drained us on multiple fronts. And then the last thing, of course, is that it's going to be a costliest year for all of us as well. That's not working out for anyone. And attacks on critical infrastructure to intensify. There have been a lot of deflective attacks. There have been a lot of sample attacks that have been carried out on airports and other facilities which are under shutdown for a while. Again, we don't have data in terms of how many of these attacks have succeeded. So only after these infrastructure facilities open up and start functioning to their full capacity, it would be realized what has really gone wrong. And stolen data will eventually turn up on dark web, no doubt about that. So whatever, if some of these entities are thinking that if we pay the ransom and then we'll be safe, no, that's not going to be the case, because they might still release this data again. So what is it we can do? So all this while I've outlined the problem. So what is it that we can do to really tackle this problem head on? Because we don't really have much time now, because as I said, the second wave has started. We are in the middle of the second wave right now, and we don't even know what kind of action will take place in the third wave. So it's only fair that we start working towards addressing these existing problems that are there. Privilege marking, again, the credential related accesses that we are providing to a lot of people in the industries, in the supply chain segment, everything has to be relooked at. We have to make sure that there are the privileges that are associated with certain accounts have to be minimized, and they have to be really revisited now in the COVID scenario. Tackle suspicious payloads at the network level through deep packet inspection. Again, that needn't be said. It is something that has been often discussed, but there's not much that has happened. We need to move faster on this, because network is where we are seeing a lot of breaches taking place, and that's where the action really is. And regular checks on to ensure integrity of endpoints. Again, in a lot of instances, we have seen that some of the manufacturers are not even aware of the kind of devices that are existing on their networks. Again, not a good place to be in. We need to make sure we are aware. The situational awareness is at the highest level, is of the highest levels, and that we are aware of every single endpoint that is connected and what's really happening at that endpoint and with the data that it's generating or it's exchanging through the network. Again, supply chain poisoning, a big problem that has popped up with a lot of backdoor Trojans being embedded in some of the hardware being sold by certain entities around the world. Big matter of concern. So there has to be proper audits that have to be done to establish a chain of trust to make sure that supply chains don't get poisoned and that there is no hardware that comes into your IT environment or OT or IoT environment that can serve as a Trojan horse for everyone else to or these hackers to enter your network on. And code signups to cover third-party dependencies. Like in some instances, like IoT, for instance, it's become so complicated that there are so many relationships at a platform and an application level, for instance, that it becomes very difficult to do a code level sign-offs that are there, especially for third-party applications, for instance, where there are multiple vendors, for instance, involved. But these are part of a basic cyber hygiene mandate that we have to implement and we have to go ahead with. And just a few more things, risk and threat modeling, again, you have to do. There has to be disaster recovery drills to cover every scenario, including the worst possible one of a complete plant shutdown. Ensure that the safety and security of employees is also taken into consideration. I'm sorry, there's some disturbance. Okay. So we have to deploy tools to recognize vulnerable malicious logic for complex manufacturing machines. Again, with these more and more complex, machines being added every now and then, the ecosystem itself becomes way more complex. And the interplay between these machines and the network and the devices and every other part of your, asset ecosystem is not fully understood. Those are not things that we can afford to at this point in time. Have regular conversations on cybersecurity internally and externally. Of course, you don't have to reveal everything to everyone, but of course, make sure that your employees are sensitized on cybersecurity requirements at all times, right? And then there is an attack deflection, like use honeypots so that they don't attack you. The attacks are deflected to a setup that mocks your IT or IoT or OT or a combined environment, converged environment out there, so that you can not just protect your assets, but also see the kind of attacks that are taking place in the manner that we study these attacks as well. And last but not least, we are always there. You can always talk to us since we are the ones who have, really we have raised the alarm. So obviously we have solutions to fix these problems to begin with. And we have always believed in partnering and collaborating with all entities, irrespective of their affiliations and their interests as far as solving these problems are concerned. So today we are working with governments, we are working with industry bodies, we are working with actual industry players, we are working with academic institutions in places like Singapore, and we are very happy to have these conversations with you to even look at areas like threat modeling and taking this whole resilience format forward. So this is a bit about us. I'll quickly conclude. This is all that we offer for all entities, strategic areas that we cover. We have a solution. We do gap assessments and vulnerability assessment. We give SOC as a service, Security Operations Center. We can set it up for you. Then we also have threat intelligence, the largest honeypot in the world. We can set up a similar facility for you so that you can deflect these attacks and also study these attacks while you are there. And we are one of the few players that has got segment focused threat intelligence repository. Like for manufacturing, we have a specific inventory of malware that we used to see, or whose signatures we used to identify the malware that are focused on manufacturing, for instance. And just some of the scenarios that are associated with these attacks, again, very complicated, but at the end of the day, everyone is vulnerable. It's not just the data, it is also the people who are connected. It's also the employees who are at risk here, because a lot of these malwares are targeting the safety and security systems that are deployed on the shop floor. And again, this is our solution, not what exactly it does. More important than everything that it does is the kind of protection it gives for these environments that I just spoke about. There's a 3-level detection framework that we have, which is again so that we don't miss the malware at any single level. Overall, we have got one of the largest threat research teams that is operating today in the industry. And we are people who are very focused on manufacturing as a segment, and OTS again as an enabling technology, OT and IoT, for instance. And we can, really work with you to model your risks and then work towards addressing those risks and lowering them, be it from a compliance perspective, be it from a business continuity perspective, be it from ensuring that your stakeholders continue to trust you, and every action that you're taking to secure your facilities. Again, our coverage includes everything from scenarios, the vectors, and the adversarial groups. We are one of the few, companies which keeps a track on the hacker groups which are out there and which are operating to destabilize certain segments, for instance. Some of them are very focused actors. So we cover everybody. As I mentioned before, we have seen how many APT groups are actually operational. APT groups are very hard to detect, but we have the capability to detect them as well. And again, our protection extends to everything. And so you can always come to us and see how we can help you solve this out. So I'll end on that note. I hope this year isn't as dangerous as we are thinking it will be. We are ready to collaborate. We're ready to work with all of you. And in case you have any doubts on anything that you have seen today, please feel free to reach out to us. We have threat reports. We have got weekly updates that we share. We can always pass those on to you so that you get a better awareness in terms of what's happening around you and what you can do internally or externally to protect yourself. So thanks a lot again for having me. Thank you, CK.